Well, hey friends, as you are getting ready to watch this podcast, I just want to inform you of one little thing that happens towards the end of the recording. So Sean and I were having our conversation, everything was going really well, and then we hear a dinging sound, and we realize that the battery on the camera died. So instead of stopping and redoing everything, we just decided let's just keep on moving, and don't worry, it's toward the end of the recording. We're going to include all of the video up to that point, and then after that it'll just be a still or a thumbnail from the YouTube video or something like that. But we felt that having the video in there was still really important. So just a little bit of a disclaimer as you're preparing, but stick through, it's really close to the end. So I really hope you enjoy this episode with my good friend, Sean Brown. Well, hey friends, and welcome back to the Another Step podcast. If you're new around here, my name is Kyle, and I'm a pastor and a dad and a husband and now a podcaster. And this is a show all about the rhythms and disciplines and habits that help people move forward and become the person that they were created to be. So if you haven't listened to any of the rest of our content, I'm hoping that today is a blessing for you and that you want to go back and check out some of the other episodes as well. Here's the really cool thing about working in conjunction with other ministers every single day is I get to twist their arm and bring them on my podcast. So today we're joined by one of my coworkers, Sean Brown. He is our involvement and outreach minister. We're going to get all into that story about how he got to where he is today. But Sean, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Twisting, not so much.
No, it was
if
more
I just
of
get
like
to talk, I'm happy.
We like it. We like it. That's kind of the running joke with preachers and ministers is like, if you just give us a microphone, like we'll fill the space of time.
We can do that.
We make it happen. So thank you for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's one of those, like when I was initially making a list of people who I wanted to be on, I knew that I wanted people who were close to me to be on at first, because those are the easier conversations to have. Like I've already kind of run into like reaching out to people that I don't know and be like, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. And they're like, I'll come on in a few months. Like I got a project I'm working on. And I'm like, I really do have to like twist some people's arms. But with people who I'm close to, it's just like, hey, you want to like go sit for 45 minutes and have a conversation that's recorded?
And I have no projects.
And so that's helpful, at least for right now. There. But come on, like this time of year, dude, we're about to like, it's going to be wild.
I know.
It's going to be really busy.
We were going over the calendar Saturday, and it's every day this week. There's stuff. And I'm like, we're not even technically in December yet.
Yes.
And now I'm dating our podcast, but that's okay.
It's totally fine, because as we're recording this, Thanksgiving was last week. So we had family in town. You guys had family in town. What was like, I kind of asked this to our students yesterday in our Bible study, but like, was there like a highlight of Thanksgiving for you this year?
Just having family together. Yeah. Our family, I tell our kids all the time, we're weird. Our family gets along really well.
That's great.
Yeah. In-laws, outlaws, and everything in between. We get along really well. And so just the traditions that we have of BB shooting contests and playing cards and having a fire and cooking hot dogs. Right. So yeah, it's just.
So it sounds like there's a lot, like y'all have a lot of traditions around the holidays and Thanksgiving and things like that. Patrick was telling me yesterday, like I asked this question in class, and he said, I did really well in the BB shooting contest. And I was like, well, how'd you do? He's like, I got 5th. And I was like, dang, dude, like there must be a bunch of y'all in this thing. So
I think there's like 12 of us.
He was pretty pumped about it.
Yeah, I lost in the finals.
He did say you got in the finals, though.
I
pretty
taunted
impressive.
beforehand.
Oh, of course. You have to, though.
Yes, it was great.
You have to. So that's great. Really exciting. I was making the comment at our Thanksgiving table. I was going through the line to get our food at Thanksgiving. There was not a single mashed potato to be seen. And everybody listening and watching this is like, what the heck is he talking about? This is where there's a little bit of crossover between some of the other projects that Sean and I work on. We recorded a video last week that was a discipleship guide for the families in our church, so that even if we weren't gathering physically, we were still able to engage with some conversations and spiritual things at home. And one of the questions that we brought up, just to kind of like get people talking, was like, what's one food that needs to be on the Thanksgiving table for you? And one of Sean's was mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes
and
all day long.
You've got the way you do it with the sticks of butter and the whole 9 yards.
Yep.
We had 2 dishes of sweet potatoes
and
no mashed potatoes. It was so good.
So don't judge my family, but we use the packaged Idaho.
That's fine.
Add water and some. I actually add a lot of butter afterwards.
That's fine.
But my dad was like, 3 bags? And I was like, no, 4. He's like, well, some people won't eat them. And I was like, but I will.
I will take care of that.
And we had like 1 little serving left because, a lot of mashed potatoes. I did eat sweet potatoes also.
Come on
I did eat them.
We did have the marshmallows on top, and I'm not a huge marshmallow person on the sweet potato, but they were good. Like I kind of like scooped underneath it so that I wouldn't get as much.
Ours was just brown sugar and a little bit of pecan sprinkled on it.
See, gosh, we literally talked like 3 minutes ago. Like it's almost lunchtime as we're recording this, and now we're talking about Thanksgiving meals. So maybe this will speed up, and we'll go eat lunch instead. But like I said, I'm really grateful that we get to have conversations like this, like all the time. Like it's one of the things that I love about podcasting is that it's really just an extension of what I enjoy doing anyway. Mm-hmm. Like I'm already thinking, like just today already, I got to sit and talk with Travis, who was on episode number 1 of this podcast. So if you haven't listened to that, go back. It'll be linked in the description. But like he and I got to sit and have a very similar conversation. How was Thanksgiving? What's going on? He told me about like a mechanical, he said it's not a drill. It's a mechanical screwdriver that like, I guess is shaped like a screwdriver and it helps him in his business and whatever. So like we just get to have these conversations just about life and things like that. And then I get to sit and record them and people want to listen in, which is just fascinating to me. And I love it. But one thing that you and I were talking about a few minutes ago was that we want these conversations, or I want these conversations to be shaped by stories. Because ultimately I think it's the stories of our lives that shape the habits and the rhythms and the practices. Because like, if you look backward on your life, on how you got to the place where you are now, that has shaped what's important to you and your values and everything else, which then dictates the things that you do on a regular basis so you can do more of it. So if family has become a core value of yours, you're going to find habits that are going to contribute to that. So what our listeners probably don't know is that the position that you have at Palmetto right now is not the first position that you've had at this church. Right. You were the very first full-time youth minister that our church had. Our church is almost 30 years old. So if you look all the way back, that's kind of where your time here started. So really what I want to hear, because I've only heard pieces and parts of this at various points in time, how did you get into ministry, and specifically ministry here at Palmetto?
So how did I get into ministry? Starts probably back in high school.
Okay.
The church that I attended had youth interns at the time. And of course, this was late 80s, early 90s. Youth ministry across the board wasn't big, but especially in Churches of Christ was just not really much was known about it. So we had an intern guy, and there was kind of this, we could hire him to come on full time. Right. And of course the students were, stoked. Yeah, we love that. Here's this guy who was in his early 20s and cool and hip and all that good stuff. And the leadership decided not to hire him. All right. Whatever the reason, I was 10, 11, 12, who knows? I don't know. Not a big deal. But then we had a family start kind of help. That was their jam. They took us on retreats and stuff like that. Right. And they were unable to continue to do that. Again, not exactly sure why. Don't know the reasons. Yeah. And then another family stepped in. And this was junior year, senior year. And all my friends were a little bit older in youth group. Right. And so I kind of checked out of youth group because they were all gone. Didn't have relationships with the younger kids. Sure. And I was working a lot. But that family, I didn't think they connected as well. The events didn't seem to be as focused. Right. And so I just remember going off to college. I went to Lipscomb University, which is a Church of Christ school. And I thought, I'm going to take Bible classes, youth ministry classes, because I would like to, when I get out of school, get into a church, I want to be able to help. Like that first set of people were really great. Really thought that they put time and effort and energy into us. And I wanted to do that. So that was the plan. Went off to college. You know, at the time you had to take a Bible class every day. You had classes. So it wasn't hard to find ministry courses to take. One of my best friends had interned at a church, comes back after that summer and is like, hey, I'm interviewing this church, Hendersonville Church of Christ is going to be, they're going to hire a full year intern and then a 9-month intern. He's like, you should come interview. Yeah. I'm like, I have no idea. Like, what? Why are you telling me to interview for this? I'm not a ministry major. He was. Right. It's not, it's not what I'm going to do. He's like, it'll be great. So I decide I'll go ahead and do it. Like, what's it going to hurt? Sure. He gets the full year. I get the 9-month. So talk about loving life with your best friend. Yeah, totally. For, days on end. Right. So I did that. That was fun. Great time. Right. Graduate college, spend a year in Nashville. That's where I'm going to live the rest of my life. It's great. Life is good. Dating a girl. Everything's going to be great. Right. Break up with the girl. Everything falls apart. And it's like emotional wreck. Move home. Go to a counselor because I had these plans and they're not there anymore. Right. And I'm like, this is not good. I graduated with a business degree, management, accounting minor. I was going to go into sales, live in Nashville, make millions of dollars, and live happily ever after. Right. So I moved back in April or May of 99 and just hanging out here. Can't find a job, which was really bizarre. Couldn't find a job. The church here had hired an intern. Okay. And 2-3 weeks before he was supposed to come in, some things happened and he wasn't able to come. Okay. And so they was like, hey, you did an internship. Why don't you come do this for a summer? And I was like, cool. Job. 3 months. And as soon as I find my forever job, I'm out. Because I'm going to go to business and I'm going to make a lot of money and be happy ever after. So 3 months comes and goes. Snap your fingers. And there is no job, and the congregation decided we want him to stay on. It wasn't the elders at the time. Okay. It was really the congregation. And the elders like, look, we ain't got the money for this. We haven't budgeted for this. We don't have a plan for this. Right. And the church said, nah, we want to do this. Wow. And so August of 99 is my quote unquote official start date. Gotcha. Until August of 2016.
Wow. So that's 17 years? 17 years. Yep. Sheesh. Okay. So
I held children in the hospital on their first, second, third day of life and watched them almost graduate high school.
All right. That's crazy.
That is weird.
That's really I remember being the longest we've been at a church so far is 4 years. So we had kids who began our ministry 6th, 7th grade, and we almost saw them graduate. And then you kind of watch on social media and you see them wow, okay, they've come a really long way. But dude, 16 years, you're I literally saw you in the hospital. That's a progression. So I want to backtrack for a second. You were at Lipscomb. You were not a Bible major, which for some people is what the heck is that? Yes, you can major. You can get a degree in theology, Bible, things like that. Your friend was. Were y'all roommates or okay? So you're roommates, and then suddenly now we're working together. Were there any did you ever get to a point where that became strained, or was this just living the dream? We're doing ministry together. This is great.
So it was living the dream. Before both of us got internships, we were part of a service organization called Sigma Pi Beta at Lipscomb, and it was for anyone who would work with high school students and below. Okay. So teacher, social work, ministry, across the board. Anybody could be a part of this, and it's a service group. We would do these trips where we would go to a church, 10, 15 people from college would go to a church.
Right.
We'd spend a weekend with the youth group.
Totally.
We'd do service projects, whatever. Well, the guy that was leading that at the time got a call from a youth minister and said, hey, I was wondering if there were any guys that would like to come out and do a retreat for us. And so there was myself, Jason, Rob, and Barry. And the leader was like, hey, I got this thing. Would y'all like to go do this? And we're like, sure.
Yeah, sounds great.
Because we have no idea what we're doing. No clue whatsoever.
It's fine.
So the four of us go to somewhere in Middle Tennessee and do this retreat. And we had no idea we were getting paid for this.
Oh, okay. That's
like, we just thought we were going. And a couple weeks later, this paycheck comes. And I guess, paycheck. And all four of us are like, can we do this? Can we take money from the church? Like, is this allowed?
Right.
I think it was like $150.
Hey.
But, in college, $150,
$150 is a long way.
in the mid 90s, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And just remember, like, this is so weird. We can't do this. Like, are we going to be struck down?
Oh, that's awesome.
So that happened before we got into this internship.
Yeah.
And so then we get this internship.
Right.
And it's just, there were some tough times.
Right.
But they did a summer camp. They had their own summer camp, day camp for younger kids. Okay. And one of the guys that we were friends with at Lipscomb was the lifeguard. So cool. It's the three of us. And then they had a girl come in from Freed named Jenny.
Okay.
And we all clicked.
Yeah.
Like, it was just great.
Yeah. See, and I think that's something that sometimes we take for granted when you're getting to do something that you love alongside people who you also love. Like, there's a lot of people probably listening and watching this who their job is good. They enjoy it, but they're doing it alongside people that they're just like, I can't stand my boss. Like, I can't do this. Or, my coworker I just can't, we don't get along, whatever. And that's genuinely something that I've never experienced. Like, especially in churches, we've been really, really blessed to, whether it's leadership or other men and women on staff, like, I've just always had we click, we get along, we help each other grow. Like, sure, there are always moments where it's like we're getting on each other's nerves or somebody says something or whatever, but like that's life. Like, we can get through that kind of stuff. And I think there's something about having a common vision, a common dream for the future that just kind of like unites a little bit. And for y'all in college doing it, it probably was the holy crap, are we actually going to get paid to do this kind of thing? Like, you mean we can go take kids on a retreat and earn money for it? Like, this is exciting.
And the coolest part about that story is several years later, I'm at Impact. Yeah. And this girl walks up to me. She's early 20s, mid 20s. And she's like, are you Sean Brown? And I'm like, yeah. Who are you? And for those who don't know, Impact is a summer camp at Lipscomb University. Yeah. I'd say
a couple thousand.
I don't know if it's that big, but it's pretty big and it's well done.
Yeah, it's really well done.
And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, my name is, I don't remember her name. But as soon as she said her name, I was like, that sounds familiar. And she goes, did you ever do a retreat for this church?
No way.
And I was like, yeah, I did. And she goes, do you remember me? And I said, yes, I do. And she goes, I still remember that retreat. And I'm married to a youth minister now.
Stop it.
And I was like, like, that was just, that was one of those moments. And I still remember a little bit of the retreat. And, but I'm like, oh, how did God use Ford? Goofy.
But isn't that crazy that it's usually like, man, I'm telling you, it's always the event that you thought went terribly or it was just fine or whatever, that years later somebody's like, dude, that was the turning point for me.
We didn't know how bad or how good it was. Like, it was
we
just
had no way to determine.
We had fun. Like, that's all that mattered, right?
Yeah, sure. It's all good.
Yes, we preached Jesus and had fun.
And at some point, I think that's all that matters in most instances. So 1999 all the way up to 2016. I mean, I think for a lot of people, they're already looking at that and being like, dude, I don't think I'm going to stay in my job for 17 years. And what
some of our listeners probably don't know is that is like an incredible outlier when it comes to youth ministry in particular. Depending on the statistic that you look at, the average tenure of a youth minister is somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. And that's usually like if they stick around for a while is 3 years. But for some of the guys, it's a stepping stone to something else. They go preach or they go whatever. But unfortunately for a lot of guys, like, they don't find that ministry is what they thought it was going to be. Like they do the internship and they thought it was great. And then they get into full-time work and they're like, okay, this is way harder than I expected. People are not nearly as nice to me as I thought that they would be, like whatever. And they get disillusioned along the way and they leave. Yeah. And suddenly they're, selling insurance instead of doing ministry. Nothing wrong with selling insurance. Just need to put that disclaimer in there. But like they're not doing what they went to school for, what they were trained for. So I think the natural question that just comes up for me is like, how did you stay in it for so long, particularly so long at one place? Now, obviously you're from here. This is your hometown. There are those factors, but like, how did you stay in ministry for so long? Like 17 years in one space. Like, how did you do that?
I think there are a lot of factors. First off, I never planned to get in ministry, and I think that was pretty helpful.
Yeah, okay.
We were talking earlier, there were certain people at school, of course, and they were like, we're doing this, and then within 2 years, they're out.
They're gone.
And so I don't know if it's just they got blinders on, they don't know what's coming, or what. And not, like I said, a lot of those guys that I knew in college, guys and girls, they came from large churches with a well-run youth ministry. Yeah. I came from a 300-person church, which growing up in South Carolina was huge, with a decent youth ministry, but not a youth minister led, not real focused. Yeah. And so I didn't have anything to compare it to, whereas some of these guys and girls do. And of course, if you're coming from a 1,000-member church, that's not where you're starting. You're starting at a 200, 300 person. It's a lot different. Yeah. And so I was going from a 300-person church to a 250-person church. Right. Wasn't that big of a deal to me. Very similar. During my 9-month internship, there were 2 situations that happened. Neither one of them were the intern's fault, but they got blamed on the interns at the beginning. And then the youth minister, great guy, Clay Brown, stepped in and was like, wasn't the interns, so don't mess with them. The first one was, this tells you how old I am. There was an AOL email account. Nice. For the interns. And I got the password from several of the students.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You can already see where this is going, right? There's already some issues, right? And so one day we come in the office and some student, obviously, has gotten on the intern email and sent some other students, claiming it was us. Oh, my goodness. And we're like, I didn't even know the password until so-and-so told me what it was, and so that was cleared out. And then this is also a long time ago for those who, don't know dial-up phones and stuff like that. You could call certain phone numbers, and they would charge you by the minute for things. And one Wednesday night before Bible class, somebody made one of those phone calls from one of the office phones. And so it had to be the interns. Of course. And I was like, why would it have to be an intern? Blame us. I was out of town, so we knew it wasn't me. Come to find out, it was one of the kids in the youth group just walked in. And things you don't think about. But when I came on staff here, there's a way that you could keep that from happening. And that was done because of my situation. So I tell those 2 stories because I had already seen kind of, not an ugly side, but just life. Yeah. Real life. And when you're there for 9 months, you see the day in and day out work. Most internships are during the summer, and it is hold on, and you don't get a lot of sleep. Yep. And then you hit August when the kids go back in school, and it's like, what do I do now? Well, I'd already seen that. And one of the classes at Lipscomb had done a great job. It was a programming class. I cannot think of the guy that led it. He was at Woodmont Hills at the time. Okay. But one of our assignments was we had to plan out a year calendar. Oh, yeah. And they were great. You know, it was fun. And I had already had this internship, so it helped me out a little bit. Yeah. But there were just all types of crazy stuff that people brought in, and he'd be like, let's think about this. Like one of the guys, they were in Florida. Like he gave you different locations, salary, budget, stuff. Two of the guys that working together were in Florida, and they were going to have a hurricane party on this date. When a hurricane came through, they were going to have like a lock.
You just know the hurricane's coming in.
Well, that was like the first thing. He's like, so you know when the hurricane's coming? And they're like, yeah. Secondly, do you think parents want kids at the church? And it was hysterical. Like, but I remember when they were telling it, like, I'm going, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then
sounds awesome.
He just like slowly like asked questions, and you're like, oh yeah. But he was great. He explained,
totally.
This is why we do at Woodmont. This is why we do what we do, and why we've done it, and how we've come to it, and and just really helped me prepare. Yeah. And I think that helped with the 9 months of knowing, okay, there's days where you're going to be like twiddling your thumbs. What do I do? And so that helped. Like you said, I grew up here, so that was part of it. I'm a loyalist. Deep down. Yep. I love my teams, even though they're horrible. I love
Go Tigers.
I love my sodas. I love, whatever it is. I'm kind of a loyalist. So, and I also think being at a smaller church, going back to sports teams. Yep. You coach at a Power 5 school, and they expect certain things. Yeah. You coach at a smaller school, and hey, you win 8 games. We're really happy with you, and it's a different mentality of things. And so I think being at a smaller congregation helped, because I would see those guys that would go to a bigger congregation. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because those congregations need that, and there would always be difficulty a lot of times because smaller church, less things going on, bigger church, more responsibilities, more this, and it seemed, grass is greener on the other side, but it's harder. And so that wasn't ever a push for me. Okay. And then when I got married, my wife's from Alabama, so I didn't really want to move anywhere that would take us farther away from them. Yeah. Of course, my parents live here. And so a lot of that, and I also think just learning early on that this church was here before I got here, and most likely this church would be here after I left. Right. My job is not to create such an issue that I split the church, that I divide the church, that I cause people to walk away from God, from church. Right. And so battles that I would have liked to have fought, I chose not to fight them. But I could continue to have those conversations with the students and let them, as they moved on in their faith, have those conversations. Yeah. But I think that was a lot of it, just, where I'd come from, the lessons I had learned, the loyalty. Right. And I had great leadership. Yeah. They let me do what I wanted to do. Right. And there were times where they would say, nope, not doing this, we're not doing that. Right. For those of you who don't know, Church of Christ, in their worship is a cappella. They don't use instruments. And for a long time, no instruments anywhere, anything. My second or third year here, we had this band called Reliant K come perform. They let me do stuff. They let me try things if there was reason. Like I wasn't allowed just to do something just to do it. Of course. But hey, this is our reason. This is our thought. And there were times where they would pull back and say, hey, that's not best for us. Of course. And did I get upset? Sure. That's what I wanted to do. But I understood it's not just about me. It's not just about my students. It's about loving others. And hey, if this is going to cause a huge problem, am I really loving people? And we were talking this morning about people do need to grow in their faith. But sometimes we do we try to make such a big impact that it's not helping grow, it's actually creating more problems. And so thankfully God gave me that understanding. But I think a lot of it this was never I didn't plan to do this. Right. But once I got in it, people would say, what's your 5-year plan? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. Wherever I am in 5 years is where God has me. Right. And I enjoyed it. It just became like a passion and a love. So,
well, and you learned pretty early on that just because something is outside of what your plans were didn't mean that it was bad or anything. I mean, like, because your plan was, you know, sales, Nashville, different city, different state, completely different environment, all the things, different relationships. And then those things dissolved, didn't work out. And it didn't mean that life was suddenly going, you know, in a bad direction. It just meant there was something else there. So now you have this opportunity to have new expectations for it and just learn along the way. So I love that. And I really I've always admired people who can stay, in your words, loyal, in other words, faithful to a place for a long period of time.
And it doesn't mean I didn't look.
Oh, sure.
Or, you know, sure. I'm not saying, oh, I never,
right.
You know, now, did a church ever chase me? No, I had one in 17 years.
Yeah.
I didn't get chased, but it doesn't mean that I didn't look, or if a job came up, I didn't think about it or
sure.
pray over it. But it was just, it
right.
wasn't
right.
where God was calling me.
100%. So at some point, though, and I mean, gosh, 2016 feels like forever ago. Like I feel like on some levels,
it's like a pandemic ago.
God, what a pandemic? What are you talking about? Huh? So 2016 comes around, and you make the decision to shift into something else. Tell me about that. How did you come to that decision? How did you know it was time? And then what did you transition into?
So a little backstory on that. While in youth ministry, we did this thing called Carolina Work Camp, which is where several churches in North and South Carolina got together. And we would meet in one city during the summer, and we would go paint houses and do some service work. And throughout the year, of course, we would have planning meetings and stuff because that takes a lot of work. Yeah, and so Greg Kirby, who was at Somerville Church of Christ at the time, he would drive to Columbia, and from Columbia we'd go to Charlotte, right. Because it was kind of the central place. And so Greg had gone to Lipscomb with me. He was a couple years younger. Him and his wife had done a lot of work with the inner city ministry work at Lipscomb, which I never did. But we would talk about
right.
inner city work and things like that, which would make me, you know, think. I grew up middle class, right. middle upper class, predominantly white area. And, you know, the only stuff I saw was stuff on TV and the stereotypes. And,
right.
and so through college, I had done an inner city mission, which was beautiful. Jim Hinkle, who's at Sycamore View in Memphis. He was also the president of Sigma Pi Beta at the time. Okay. He's kind of who got me into youth. If you said who got you in, besides God, who got Jim you Hinkle. In, it was Jim Hinkle.
Gotcha.
And he lassoed me into that trip, helped break a lot of the stereotypes that I had grown up seeing on TV and hearing people talk about. Yeah. And so from there, you know, talking to Greg, some guy named Shane Claiborne had come to our youth ministry conference and had talked, and I read his book, Irresistible Revolution, which led me to Tony Campola's stuff,
gotcha.
Which then led me to Robert Lupton and some of his stuff, Toxic Christianities and Theirs of the Kingdom, just talking about the poor and poverty and all of that. And so it really gotten me thinking and looking. And early on when I moved back here, I had always had a dream of creating a community center where there would be homework, you know, tutoring for homework. There would be opportunities for families to learn skills. Right. There would be a place where families that got evicted would be able to go and spend while they try to get kind of their feet back under them, or maybe they lost house fire, whatever it was. And the more I learned about this stuff, the more it just felt like God was turning my heart. And I remember, and I couldn't find the book we were talking about this morning before we came in here, but there was a line in one of the books where I think it was Tony Campola was talking about a girl had come into his office, was real excited. She had interviewed for this teaching job, and there were all these applicants, and she beat them all out, and she was so excited. And he didn't chastise her per se, but he was kind of like, why didn't you go for one of these in these schools where they don't have teachers, where they are struggling? And I remember thinking at the time, that is the dumbest thing to say. Like, here's this girl who's got this job and it's amazing, and she can do great things at that school. Yeah. And I still don't disagree with that, but man, there was something that stuck with me about that. Yeah. And that was like 20 years ago, and I'm still thinking about it, and I want to go back. Can't find the book, and I want to go think about that.
Yeah.
But all that had just been leading us to doing different things around Palmetto.
Sure.
Around the area. I gotten involved in the school improvement council at the school down the street from us, which is Title I, which I didn't know was Title I. You know, when it opened in 1980, this school, it had 1,000 kids. It's down the street from our church in what was considered a really middle upper class neighborhood. Well, come back in early 2000s, and now 48% of the kids are on free and reduced lunch. It's like, it's interesting and doesn't look like it. So a lot of this has been going on. And I went to a pastor over at Three Rivers Baptist, and I was like, hey, I want to do something like this. And I kind of laid out this thing about this idea I had. I said, I'm not looking for answers from you, but you're the only guy I know doing this type of stuff with your congregation. What you got? And he's like, oh, this is the most random conversation. He's like, go see this place called Acts Metro.
Okay.
And I'm like, never heard of it. Sounds great. I'll go look at it. And Acts Metro had started out of a church, Eastlake Community Church, and Eastlake had spun it off into its own thing. Basically what they did is they had a social worker on staff who worked with the social workers of the school district, Lexington, Richland 5, finding families that are either in generational or situational poverty, and would walk with them for a year. They would get a group of mentors that would walk with them. Acts Metro would help financially with some stuff. They'd offer some counseling, some financial piece from Dave Ramsey to help with stuff. And just walking through families. They would pray with them. They would help them with food and clothing. And they could say, hey, what do you want to be in a year? What's your goal? And we would back it up and start with those process. I was like, man, this is awesome. And so really fell in love with that, while also being in love with youth ministry. But I was kind of shifting. And so I was like, how do I do that? Because they can't pay me, but I can't do youth ministry. Like, worlds are kind of colliding, and I don't know what to do. And I'll be honest, I just kind of, I said God was calling me. But looking back at it, it was just my selfishness, which I'm okay saying. He still has blessed me in those 7 years since. Looking back, would I have done it the way I was selfish. I don't think I'd change it because of what I've learned and grown from there. But I was like, how do I do this and this? Well, I had started dealing with real estate, just looking at stuff. And I was like, I can do real estate. I can do that. You can set your own schedule, which is a lie, by the way. You can make all this money, which is true, but it's really hard. And you can't set your schedule for the first, you got to set your schedule. So I went into real estate, stepped out of youth ministry, went into real estate to work with Acts Metro. Unfortunately, by the time I started into this, Acts Metro was on its way out. I went on staff with them for about 1.5 years, but we had to shut the doors, which was fine because I learned a lot and grew from that. And honestly, pandemic would have crushed us anyways. So it was kind of nice that we were able to graduate all our clients, and then about 1 year later is when the pandemic hit. And so it was really great timing. I still miss that program because I still think it did some amazing things and does some amazing things, but everything was shifting right at that time. Like, all the social workers from the district that had been working with us were retiring. So new ones were coming on, and they didn't quite understand what we were doing. And it was a new style of social work. The ones that we had been educated 25 years ago, whereas these new ones are coming up with different ideas and different things. And so it worked out fine. I miss Acts Metro, but the relationships were great. The things that it did were great. But how I got out of youth ministry into that was really, looking back, it was selfish. It was, I took everything as, oh, God is pushing me towards this. And he wasn't. It was just me being selfish. But he was faithful and he was kind. And I understand that I was selfish, and I've admitted to that.
Well, thanks for being vulnerable in that, because most of us, like, even like we would want to push push the reasons to something else. We would rather say, there was a part of me in it, but it was XYZ instead. Yeah. So I really appreciate you sharing that side of yourself. So, what we haven't shared and what I don't think we've mentioned on here is that you and I got to work together for a summer. I was an intern here. And I remember in that summer seeing so much of that drive and that passion that you had for serving the underprivileged in our community. I mean, we went around, we had feeding programs every single day. I remember driving to local schools and picking up the food and taking it places and all this kinds of things. So like I got to see that firsthand, and I still see it in you today, which I think is part of the reason why you're in the role that you're in now. We saw a lot of the work that you did through Acts Metro, and it wasn't isolated. It was stuff that you had already been doing, already been passionate about, and continued to do so. I mean, you served as a deacon here in that very similar community outreach type of space for a period of time. And now you're doing a lot of the same similar stuff, just under the umbrella of a church and an expanded role and some involvement and things like that. So, tell me about, and I don't want to belabor the entire story, but like, tell me about what that shift was like to come back to working for a church. Cause I know a lot of guys who work in church for any number of months, years, whatever, they leave, but then most of them are like, I don't want to go back. They left and they like I can go make more money over here, or I can live somewhere different, or I'm not tied to where I go to church or whatever. And they don't come back into church work. But you did. And you kept with real estate and you kept being involved in community and things, but then you moved back and you started working here again. Tell me about that process. How did you make that decision to step back into full-time ministry at a church?
Well, I think the first thing for me is I chose to walk away instead of being fired, let go, or, asked to resign. So that's, that's number one. It was on my own. Yeah. Secondly, coming to the realization that I had done it selfishly, brought back that wasn't really good. Maybe God wasn't done with me. Maybe he was. That's fine. Right. The good thing about the 6 years out was learning a lot about, and you see this, I've talked with other friends about this. Why can't we get more volunteers? Why can't we do this?
It's hard.
And just seeing the life that was portrayed through my company, which my company that I worked for, the brokerage I worked for, talks about faith first. Faith, family, then business. But then when you get into it, it's like, you say that, but you're really about the business. And so I was struggling to be able to spend time with church, doing things I wanted to do with church, because when you're doing most of your stuff Saturday and Sunday, when people are off. Yep. And so open houses, taking buyers around, stuff like that. So I had been missing ministry. And of course, before you came, Freddie was here, and Freddie would allow me to do stuff, which helped. But I just remember I miss the kids. I miss the relationships. I like teenagers. I know it sounds weird. I relate maybe because I haven't matured yet. I'm still like that college guy. Yeah. I think I'm just odd, and I get it, and I'm okay with that. But I love relating with teenagers. They'll listen, they'll ask questions, they'll frustrate the snot out of you, but then you'll see that light bulb moment and you're like, oh, this is great. And I'd always thought about maybe teaching. When I went to Lipscomb, I was like, maybe teaching. And so it's always been a part of my heart. And so I had always, I'd say 4 years out of being out of ministry, I started just getting on some websites, looking up jobs and listening and stuff. And it's like, man, I really want to get into youth ministry. And so we started praying about it. Emily and I started praying about, I think I want to get back into it. And prayed. And then the leadership here came and said, hey, we got this idea. I was like, well, I've been praying about getting back into ministry. I didn't think it would be that.
Right.
But yeah, let's take a swing at it. When I first got into youth ministry, a friend of mine told me, he's like, do it for 2 years.
Yeah.
He goes, what worst case scenario? You get a job for 2 years. You get a resume built that says you worked with volunteers, you created a budget, you do all these things that are very business-y. You don't like it, get out. I was like, okay. And so I kind of same thought process with this, you know, let's give it, I don't know. They don't know. Like both of us are, you know, coming at this job.
Totally.
We don't know what it looks like per se. It's new.
Sure.
Like 20 years ago when I did the youth ministry, they weren't real sure what it would look like.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we'll give it time. We'll go after this and we'll see where God takes us. Yeah. And so that's how I kind of got back into it. But I was looking to get back in.
Right.
And God was just kind enough to allow it to be here so I didn't have to move my family and things like
Isn't
that.
it so interesting that you pray for something and you think that God is going to answer it in one way, or like you at least think he's going to open a certain kind of door, right? And then he answers exactly what you've been asking for, just like from a different angle. Yeah. And he's like, no, try this one instead.
Yeah, because it was definitely a different angle. Because I was actually just saying, Lord, do you want me back in ministry?
Yeah.
Yay or nay, let me know by this date. Like I do the date thing. Look, I do the date thing. I don't. No. Throughout Scripture, people said, "Lord, show me a sign," and I have no issue with that. And if you do, that's fine. Right. But it was literally, here's a date. Sure. Let me know. And I should have been, you know, you'd think by now I'd be more specific in my prayers. Not that I don't love this job, but I really thought if I got back in, it would be youth ministry. Totally. I really did. And so when this came, I was like, I don't know what I was praying about, right? But this sounds intriguing. Yeah. And so,
but I love the way that, you know, you kind of connect. I think God in our life kind of moves in seasons. God works through various seasons of life. And I love that you said, like, it's almost like this is my first time in ministry over again. Like I'm coming into this, it's a new role. Hamada's never had an involvement in outreach minister before, which means you get to come into this thing and dream a little bit and think a little bit. And it means that it's messy and, you know, that part didn't really work. And let's shift this thing. Times already, but look, it happens to all of us. So I just love the fact that you're able to step into something that is different and it is new, but it's also familiar. And I love the way that God works that and that life kind of moves that into space. So you wear a lot of hats. I mean, we were literally talking just a few minutes ago. You're a minister, you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a coach, you coach volleyball. That's one of the things we haven't hit on at all in this conversation is that you coach volleyball for a school right down the street, and which is kind of an extension of youth ministry. I like to look at it like it's a way
and outreach.
Yeah. So it kind of brings all of the stuff that you're passionate about together. Now I think it's hard enough for people who have a 9-to-5 for them to balance their job and their family and their like core relationships. For you and I, we've got various ones, but like, you know, we just mentioned yours, coach, dad, minister, husband, all of the things. Is there like one or two specific like habits, rhythms, disciplines that just help you, I don't want to say like balance it all because that feels a little bit not quite what I'm trying to get at, but just helps you keep moving? Because I can imagine that, especially like in volleyball season, that's a difficult, busy season. So do you have like rhythms, habits that help you kind of move forward, take another step, like the name of this podcast, in that direction? You see what I'm doing here?
Yeah, I do. I like that. The next steps. You know, for me, it's using the time of prayer, not having necessarily a set time, right, but a constant, this is overwhelming. This is hard, Lord. What am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Right. And going back to that time of prayer. And you and I were talking about that this morning. I've always been kind of okay, God, let me see it. Sure. Big joke, you know.
Oh crap, the battery just died. Keep going. Keep going.
You know, one of my big jokes is when Emily and I were dating, I'm always okay, Lord, I need a big sign. I'm kind of dumb, you know. And literally the next day I'm driving to her house, and the giant billboard of the jewelry store with the diamond ring saying, ask her to marry you. No, that is not a lie. That's not a preacher story. That's amazing. Honest truth.
That's awesome.
And so it's always been, okay, you say ask, I'm asking.
Right.
And let's just see where this goes.
Sure.
And so for me, just remembering that time of prayer, and it's not always easy, because there's times where there is not an audible answer.
Sure.
And it's just, okay, I just got to keep moving forward.
Right.
And pushing. And I have to remind myself, you know, all the heroes of the faith that we see throughout Scripture, we're only getting snippets of their day in and day out life.
Yeah.
We see the big story. We're like, oh, David did this, and Joshua did this, and Deborah does this. And, well, what about the 3 months after? You know, what was happening? And so just that constant reminder of communicate.
Yeah.
You know, communicate. Keep saying what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and trust.
Right.
You know, trust that God is going to fulfill his promises.
Yeah. I can imagine that for people listening to this, when we start to talk about practices, rhythms, habits, there is a temptation for some of us we want to make it about our control. Like, oh, if I can just do X, Y, Z, then my day is going to go perfect and I'm going to have the perfect life. It's like I have this strange infatuation with people's like morning routines. And you know, there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down on YouTube just about like, let's find the top CEOs morning routines and let's do them. I mean, there's a guy that I've seen where he goes and he's like, for 30 days, I tried Matthew McConaughey's morning routine and I tried this person's, and it's like, okay, I get it. But I think we have this temptation to say, all right, if I can find the perfect practice, if I can find the perfect thing, then that's going to be the silver bullet. That's going to be the thing that actually helps me move forward. Now, I wouldn't have started this podcast if I didn't think that those practices were important. If I didn't think that creating what we would call in the Christian faith a rule of life, if I didn't think that was important, we wouldn't be having these kinds of conversations. And yet, I think it's important to understand that the growth doesn't come from inside of us, it's outside of us. God is the one, and I've mentioned before, this is not an explicitly Christian podcast, and yet I'm talking to ministers. Like, it's gonna come up. This is what we do on a day in and day out basis. But I think it's really important that you mentioned that prayer is that practice for you. Even if it's not like every day at 12 p.m. I am, sitting down for a prayer. No, it's a part of who you are. And I think when a practice becomes a part of who you are and it's just an extension of your personality, it doesn't have to be set at specific times. It's just the overflow of everything that you do. Anyway. So I love that you mentioned that. So as we start landing the plane, I'm looking at the time, and I know we didn't technically start recording this when my timer said 0, but we're getting toward the hour mark. I don't know where this will exactly be when we actually post this, but I want to move through some semi-rapid fire questions. Some of these will be related to what we talked about, but then some of them are just kind of a stereotypical, like almost like an icebreaker question, and I'm 100% okay with it. So let's start with, what is one book that you think everybody should read?
I'm going to go 2 books. I'm going to say Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis. It was the first book outside the Bible that I read. Okay. And I was like, what? And it was in college. Yeah, I don't like to read. I'm not a great reader, but I just read it and was like in love with that book. Strength to Love by Martin Luther King Jr. Great book. I've read Mere Christianity a bunch of times. Yeah. Strength to Love, I've read 3 or 4 times. I just came across it probably about 10, 12 years ago. Oh, wow. Just really neat. Really neat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just powerful, and you can hear his voice as you read it. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. And I'm going to link everything that we mentioned in the description, just in case anybody wants to go pick these up for themselves. So you say you're not a reader. Are you like an audiobook person though?
No, because I'll just zone out.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't do well reading.
I love podcasts, which is part of the reason why I started one of my own, but I can't do audiobooks.
I can't
for the exact same reason.
I can't do podcasts real well either.
Really?
Same
Okay.
thing. Just kind of get lost.
Yep.
And a lot of it goes back to talking about how did you come.
Totally.
When I drove back and forth from Columbia, South Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee,
Right.
in a 1984 Honda Prelude with a broken radio.
Nice.
A lot of dead time.
Totally.
You know, didn't have Spotify and all this stuff. So it was a lot of
Dude,
quiet
you were
time.
practicing like extreme silence and solitude before it was cool.
I just didn't know that's what it was.
You're like, I just thought I was bored.
Yeah, I was just bored. Trying not to get caught by police.
That's
driving
amazing.
fast.
Yep, I-40, that'll do it to you. All right, what is one movie that you think everybody should watch? And it's okay.
Yeah.
Travis said Goodfellas, so like if it's less than family friendly, we're okay.
I'm a big Tombstone fan.
Okay.
Just fast forward through all the relationship, part.
That's one of my parents' favorite movies.
Rob Touchstone and I would literally go to lunch at Lipscomb before our 110 class, whatever time it was, and we would go through and we would watch that movie, like fast forward to the parts we liked.
That's amazing.
We would quote that movie. Rob, Barry, Jason, and I would quote that movie all the time.
That's awesome. That's one of my parents' like top, up there with like Gladiator and some of these others. Like that's like in their top couple. Okay, what is one quote that you live by?
I go back often to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
Okay.
Trust the Lord, all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths.
That's good.
That one we had 2-3 hours. I could explain why that's been so important to me throughout my life.
That's good.
But that's just the one that and then just a funny one that I used to have this billboard of stupid sayings, but the best way to double your money is to fold it up and put it in your pocket. I say that all the time to my kids, sometimes to myself. That's just a stupid one, but it's
pretty good.
I'll just be like, people say, I don't have money. I'll be like, the best way to double your money? Fold it over, put it in your pocket. And they think about it and then they get mad at me. They're like, you're not doubling your money. I'm like,
but it feels like you are.
But you're not spending it. So.
That's pretty good too. Oh, that's awesome. That is Rachel's favorite Bible verse as well. So I love that you decided to quote it as well, because there's something about Bible memorization that I think is a game changer for a lot of people.
Totally agree.
So a couple more that are relatively related. And this is not one that I pitched to you originally, so we'll see how you answer this. If you had to eat one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It's probably pizza.
Dude, that was Travis's too.
I know it was.
Is there like a particular pizza place that it would be, or just pizza in general?
Pizza in general.
But don't you do like family pizza night every week or something?
Every Friday, yeah.
All right.
Back in the day when I first came back here, there was a place called Pizza Factory.
Dude, I miss Pizza Factory.
And I wanted to buy it. Worst story ever. This is my sympathy story. Went to Honduras, came home from Honduras, been gone for 10 days, serving the Lord. Go to Pizza Factory because I missed it. So literally, like, the waitresses knew me. There's a lot of fun stories with Pizza Factory for me. I bust all the tables one day because they were so busy, and they're like, why? And I was like, because. Why don't you come? And literally, I was like, look, why don't you come to church one Sunday?
That's how you can pay me.
One of the girls ended up coming to Christ later on. Not through our church, but I feel that was a seed that was planted.
You planted a seed.
Anyways, so I go to Pizza Factory because and I drive up and there's no cars and there's people coming out. And I'm like, what's going on? And I get out and the lady's like, sorry, they're closed. You just shut the business down while I was in Honduras. And I may have cried. Yeah, it's probably pizza for me. I can do steak and potatoes, mashed potatoes all day long too.
Mashed potatoes are better.
Pizza, nobody in particular.
Okay.
If we could bring Pizza Factory back, their sausage, all day long.
See, now you're really hungry, because as we're recording, this is almost noon, and both of us are kind of like, all right, we need to wrap this sucker up because we're hungry.
I can still see it and smell it and taste it.
Dude, we used to go there like as a family, like family nights, because they had the arcade in the back and stuff like that. Dude, game changer.
They had pizza buffet my first few years of youth ministry. The boys during summer or spring break or whatever, and girls, but most of the time it was a lot of boys. We go play Ultimate Frisbee.
Oh, right on.
And then I would take them to Pizza.
That's fine because you knew. Yep, that works.
That's where I went.
That works. Oh. All right. If you could get on a plane right now, okay, and let's imagine that it's like a supersonic plane, so you can get anywhere you want to go in 1 hour, which is obscene. Where would you go?
Am I by myself?
No, you can take whoever you want.
If I'm taking my wife with me, we're probably going to New Zealand.
Ooh, okay.
Lord of the Rings stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she would love to do that.
That does sound awesome. See, I would love to do the whole like Australia, that thing, but every time I look, it terrifies me at how long the flight is and how long you're over the ocean. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this.
I watch too many TV shows. I can't do it.
Yeah. See, and when like one of my favorite shows of all time is Lost.
See, I was thinking that, but I was not going to say it.
No,
yes.
Lost is incredible. Like,
yes, it is amazing.
The
ending was phenomenal.
Anybody who says otherwise is,
yes.
100%. I mean, it takes a weird turn, but like,
it does.
Still amazing show.
Such a great show.
Amazing. We actually watched that. That was Rachel and I's like go-to show the year that Aslan was born. Mm-hmm. So we would kind of like just set him up in the rocker or whatever, and we would sit and eat dinner and watch Lost every single night. It was incredible.
We didn't eat dinner. We would go get a large cheese dip from the Mexican restaurant.
Come on, let's do it.
And we would sit and eat our large Mexican cheese dip and watch Lost. And we will still quote to this day. We'll go somewhere and we're like, where are we? Or something happens and it'll be like, not Penny's boat. Like, if you don't know what those things mean,
you need to go watch
Lost.
You need
to go watch it.
Now, here's what's really funny, and if people think all the way back to the beginning of this, there's an intro that explains why, if you're watching on YouTube, there's just an image. But we're still recording, and I'm still looking at the camera.
I am too,
as if it's looking at me. But no, the battery died. So here we are.
Which is typical. Whenever something like at church, I'm doing preaching or
you never know what's
doing song leading, something goes wrong with our audio video, like almost every time. Something. So this is not surprising to me that the battery dies. This is not
uncommon, but it's just okay. So, Sean, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm really grateful.
Really, we done? Because I have so much more.
You're like, I got a ton. Here's the thing. The beauty is, I did not actually get to one of my questions. There was a middle ground of the stories that you got to tell that I wanted to hit on, but I'm totally okay with it
what
because
was it? I just want to know what it was.
Well, I guess we kind of hit it. It was, we talked about you getting into ministry. We talked about you getting out of ministry and coming back in. But I wanted to spend more time there. We didn't really spend as much time. But the beauty of that is that you can come on for a second episode. So we will definitely have you on again.
3, 4, 5 more. I got a lot of dumb stories about my life. So.
Maybe we should do a whole series of this podcast where it's just like, let's just invite random people on just to tell like dumb stories.
We should get a bunch of youth ministers on.
Ooh, come on.
And just tell.
Well, JD Morris is coming on the next episode, teaser for next week.
Got some.
So maybe we can get like the two of y'all on for an episode at some point. That might get really exciting, and y'all tell stories about each other. That's exciting. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you want more of that, go ahead and comment down and just let me know, because that already sounds quite exciting to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have so much going on over the next couple of weeks, and I'm just like hoping that we can like move through it with grace.
Yes.
And not lose all insanity over the next couple of weeks with Christmas and everything else. So if you have enjoyed listening to this or watching this on YouTube, if you've stuck around, thank you so much. I am really grateful for you. But I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things for me. If you're listening to this on a podcast player like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, would you consider just giving a rating or a review? This is kind of the best way for podcasts to get recommended to other people. But if you are watching on YouTube and you've been staring at a still image of me and Sean this entire time,
sorry.
Thank you. You're incredible. But would you consider just liking the video, subscribing to the channel if you haven't already? We've seen some growth on the channel, which means new faces are joining this kind of community, and I'm really grateful for that. But would you like and comment and subscribe and all of the things? But more importantly, would you take a moment to share this with somebody? Maybe somebody who is considering career changes and needs kind of some guidance on how to process through that. Or maybe you just think this was an incredible conversation and you want to share it with a friend who would enjoy it. I would really, really appreciate that. So wherever you are, whoever you are, thank you. And I I'm really grateful for you. I hope to see you in the next one. Grace and peace, my friends. Have an amazing day.